It's early April. It's a beautiful day. It's cold. The weather's been throwing everything it can at us. We've had temperatures down to -4. We had snow last weekend and we've got snow forecasts this weekend. So things are a little bit on hold, but it's a good time to have a look round and see how the allotment's prepared, ready for April. So let's start at the beginning. It's a very good place to start. And the raspberries have started to leaf up. So I'm hoping that we'll get a reasonable crop out of this year. I've got a lot of work to do with clearing in there, but that's fine, that can wait. This morning, my boot bucket barrel froze over, so it gives you an idea how cold it was. Well, the gooseberries are looking fantastic. Every single bush now has leafed up, beautiful fresh leaves, and I noticed that we've got some flowers budding on these, so that's really good. I think we'll get some good crop off these this year. They went in early last year, so this will be the first full year, and hopefully we'll see a good few gooseberries for making my favourite gooseberry fool. The rhubarb, it's a mixed bunch really. It's certainly looking very vigorous, and that's looking particularly good. But you'll notice in there, I think those buds are for leaves, but I think this bud round here is flowers. Yeah, and that's a real problem because once it flowers, it does impact on the amount of stems and the quality of the plant. So I don't know, I did go a little bit of research, but I think the best advice is to take those out. And we've got another one here. In fact, there's two in here. So I've not seen the rhubarb flower up quite so early like that before. We've got rhubarb being blanched in this contraption here. It'd be interesting to see how that's getting on. I can see leaves up to about this level now. So I think they'll be ready for harvesting very soon, and hopefully they'll be very sweet. So you'll have seen in a recent video I pruned and prepared the pear tree. It's the best shape I think I've ever had. It's looking wonderful, and it's just full of blossom ready to burst. So I'm really looking forward to that. It won't be long now. I guess the cold weather we've been having might have been holding it back a little bit. So the fruit garden, most of the trees have budded up nicely, and some of them are starting to sprout leaves, but it's early days on those. And in the flower beds below them, I think this is cosmos. I only put cosmos in this flower bed last year, and those seem to have wintered over, and I thought that they were annuals, but they're certainly doing well, so I'm going to keep an eye on those. And maybe if you know what they are and you think they're not cosmos, let me know. Another gooseberry doing well. These are the wallflowers that we put in. This bed was a bit weak last year, so we thought we'd put some wallflowers in to kick this year off, and they're just starting to come out. I don't know, the jury's out on wallflowers. They can look a bit scrappy. We've got some back at the house that are really not very pretty to look at, but these are not too bad. There's plenty of foliage on them. So it looks like we're going to get a nice show of flowers here. And they're some of the earliest flowers that we get. And Mrs. K put a few daffs in here. They're going over now. That bed is just ready. Very few weeds this year, so the work I did last year on removing weeds is paying off. There's a bit of rose bay willow herb there. That tends to be a bit of a prolific weed around here, so we'll pull that one. And this, if you'll remember, was the poppy bed, and no signs of poppies from the seeds yet, but we've got an unusual I don't know whether that's a weed or a plant there. That's an unusual one for sure. I know that's a weed and it's coming out. And again, we've got a few daffodils in here. And this is particularly budded. And I think this is a cherry tree. So I'm quite pleased how that's coming along. And these were the calendula beds. And I've got so many calendula seeds that I will sow in the not too distant future. Get that weed out. But there are a couple starting to work their way out of the ground, so we'll see if some can self-seed from one year to the next. That's a blackcurrant which is leafed up nicely and is looking good. And this too was a calendula bed, and we've got the infamous dock leaves that love to grow in the ground here, so I'll pull him out. Need to get the roots out really. And this is an apple, and it's just showing some budding at the top, and we've got a couple of blackcurrant bushes just here that are leafed up nicely and really getting ready to go. So Mrs. K's flower bed is looking well, and we've got some very young leaves on all the raspberries, and the raspberry that I put in here, which is the only autumn raspberry I've got this year, is shooting up everywhere, which is to be expected and probably could end up taking over at this end, and that's fine. We just need to make sure it doesn't spread too far down the bed. The lavender that I sowed from seed a year ago is really established now. We've got a really nice low growing form there, which is good, and that's the same there. But we do have one or two straggly ones. This one seems to be particularly straggly, yet on the other hand behind there it's perfect, so not sure what's going on there. The daffodils are, they're past their best, but we've still got some nice flowers to look at. We've got some chrysanthemums coming on, and this is a penstemon, and it's looking really well. Lots of new growth in the middle, and there's the infamous rosebay willow herb which needs to come out. I think I need to dig some of that out. And then we've got this peony which we put in only a week or so back, and it's got 2, 4, 6, 8, probably 10 shoots coming out, and it's never had that when it was in a pot, so we're really pleased about that. And then over here in the herb area we've got this oregano which is looking really well, and this is looking a bit woody, this rosemary, but it certainly survived the winter, which is no mean feat in the cold weather we have. And we've got a foxglove there at the back, and this is parsley just starting to reshoot for the second year. Overall, I'm pleased with the fruit garden. In its second year, we don't seem to have had any real losses. Everything seems to have bedded in very well after its first year of growth. So hopefully it'll be a prolific fruit garden this year. Now, my squash bed has taken some development this year. It's had an extra bed added to it, which was part of developing the pond. And I've put down these new paths from the chicken bedding, which have got a bit of chicken manure in there, and hoping that's going to feed the squash. And of course there's nothing in at the moment. I haven't even sown those squash, because I learnt last year that you actually can leave it reasonably late, and that's probably the best because it doesn't get knocked back by the cold weather. I changed all these pots this year. If you remember, I had strawberries along here. So I put into here the horseradish, which is all coming through, and into this one we've got the artichoke, the Jerusalem artichoke, and I did 2 pots of those, and I sense that they're just slightly coming through. And in here I did have some parsley, but I'm going to recover this pot from my potatoes and just take out the soil, ready for next year's soil regeneration. I won't add that to this year's because it's not been fed. So the squash bed is dormant but ready for action. Well, this year's been a big groundwork year, and you may or may not have seen in my earlier videos, this used to be a black covered sort of weed membrane over and above a bed that's much smaller than this, and I've opened it all up and grown it in size and added a lot of compost, and that's going to be for my courgettes this year, and I'm looking forward to growing them in that. Certainly they should do better than they've done before. The other groundworks I've done, of course, is the pond, and the pond is developing nicely. We've got tadpoles in here, which is great. I think actually you can see one on the top of the rock there maybe, but there's loads in there, which is really nice, and we're beginning to plant it up and it's taking shape, so we're really pleased with how that's looking. And of course I did a lot of work along the side of these raised beds because the bank used to be right on the edge here and grow over into the nets and was a real problem. So went in with a path, and the gravel path is shaping up, although I've got a lot of mole action which is causing me a few issues. I'll live with that. And the goldfinches found the feeder in no time at all. We've filled it twice already. So all my raised beds are netted up, they're all covered in compost and they're ready for the season. There's nothing growing in them at all at this point as we wait for a little bit of warmer weather. And to be honest, in my location, mid-May is probably the earliest that you want to be putting anything out that isn't going to tolerate a frost. What I have done is put some broad beans in here and also some onion sets, and this is the first time I've done onion sets for a long time because they tend to bolt for me, but fingers crossed these will be different and we'll get a good crop. In this run, this is where I had the run of beans last year, and I did an experiment back in the summer of putting some leeks underneath the run of beans, hoping that when I took the run of bean poles down there would be some wonderful leeks to harvest. It didn't work out like that. They were winicky and had suffered from insufficient light, but I'm pleased to say that they're all coming through with some strength now, and I'm hoping that these at least will be edible at some time in the not too distant future. Although I have noticed we've got one that's bolted, so that's not a good sign because we really don't want that across all of them, but fingers crossed. So this year this is going to be the bed for my run of beans, and if you watch my recent video you'll see my plans for these wooden fence stakes to help support the bean poles, which invariably have blown down here every year for the last 3 years. So I'm hoping that I'll have cracked that this year. And this is the bed that I'm going to be growing parsnips in this year, and I've put in these purple sprouting broccoli late last year, and we've had our first feast from them and they're absolutely fantastic. And this is a bed that had clubroot. So what I did was put some lime in each of the holes before I planted the purple sprouting broccoli, in the hope that that would keep the clubroot at bay, and you've got to say that has been successful. So I'll be doing that with all my brassicas this year, regardless of whether they're going into a bed that's historically had clubroot or not, because it certainly works. This one, I don't know, until I pull it up I really don't know whether it is clubroot, but I've got a good feeling that that is just been hit very badly by the frost. All my red currants a week or two back, and there's a real flush of leaves over them now, and they've got a good shape, so hoping for a good crop of red currants this year. This morning I had another trailer full of the golden horse manure, which amazingly just topped these bins off again, and a few weeks back I topped them off. It's just incredible how horse manure just sinks down and down as it decomposes. So that's topped back up again, and that will be next year's compost to spread across the whole garden. These 3 beds along the side are just prepared and waiting and ready, and hopefully it won't be too long before we can get going. And this one, I just had some cardboard, I covered it over the top, thinking I might use that cardboard for a path, but I haven't done yet. It might well go in there just to keep on top of the weeds. You can see the water system that I've put in place, ready for the tomatoes this year. Fingers crossed that's all going to work. If you want to see how I went about making that water system, which is gravity fed, then watch one of my previous videos. The title's pretty self-explanatory. And in the cold frame, I'm covered up because we've got down to -4. But in here, we've got sweet peas, which were saved from last year's seed and are doing fantastically well. And we've got the ranunculus, which I've put into trays for sprouting. And I can definitely see lots of sprouting going on. So we're going to have a fantastic show of ranunculus. And these 2 are auriculas or primulas or polyanthus, and they are long-term germinations. But I'm pleased to say that this one, get him out and open him up, has started to germinate, which I'm delighted at. And that is Victorian silver lace. So I'm looking forward to that growing on. Let's get that on so we can maintain the humidity in those. This one looks like it might need a bit of water, so I'll put that on my agenda. So I'll close this lid down. And in this one are plants for the garden which have just been wintered over, and that green foliage plant seems to be doing really well. We put that in the hanging baskets each year, so Mrs. Kerr will be pleased about that. So this old galvanised tank used to have the dahlias in it, but I'm using it at the moment like a cold frame. And these were the strawberries that looked the worst from the ones that were hit by frost, and they're starting to come back well. Again, I think I need to give them a bit of water. It's so easy to underwater when it's freezing cold. And around the polytunnel, I've got a bit of grass growing, so I've got a job sometime to get it cleaned up, get those out when I look at them. And the same goes for all the way up the side, a bit of weeding to do, but not too much. It's one of those annual jobs that I have to do just to make sure I don't get overrun by weeds. So the beds are pretty much primed and waiting for warmer weather. So some other winter work that I did was to create this patio. I've not finished. I've got to get a retaining wall along here. I'm just waiting for the right piece of wood or something to do the job. But the sand from under the edge is falling away, so I just need to be careful that those stones don't tip when we tread on them. This is where I put the dahlias from that galvanised tank. Early days on these, but hopefully they'll come through. And I moved the tulips, and they're just about to burst into flower, which is fantastic. So you can certainly move tulips successfully as long as you're careful. Those don't seem to have suffered at all. And these are my cat guards that I made recently. They seem to be doing the job. Okay, into the polytunnel. Well, -4 and snow in the last few days, and sadly I lost 4 tomatoes, which was really strange because there were lots of tomatoes that were doing well, and just amongst them those 4 that seemed to not be able to tolerate the cold. And I'm really covering up at the moment. There's a whole mixture of cloth covers. I've got some bubble wrap being used and fleece, so they're really getting tucked away every night. But still I lost 4. I guess in the whole scheme of things that's not too bad. So what have we got in here? We've got the remainder of the onion sets, just in case any didn't work out. We've got some Welsh onions, which is like a herb really, and they're in the back there. My dahlias that I potted up recently, still dormant, but hopefully will come through soon. My broad beans, I'm beginning to think I sowed these a bit early. I can put them out, they're fairly frost hardy, but these are fairly, well, I've looked after them and I think they might not do so well if it's too cold, so I'm sort of holding on. And what I do think is that I sowed them a bit early. And this is a really good run of seedlings. We've got plenty of cabbage and kale and turnips and lettuce, and the lobelia is doing brilliantly. And I've got 6 tomatoes in there, which was the tomato house, which is a dwarf tomato. So looking forward to those growing. This is the overwintered rosemary, which is looking well. And then another run of seedlings, mainly lettuce, tomatoes. We've got some leeks, and the onions that I recently potted on, and my boxes of lettuce. That's the one that's been going the longest. And in the interest of succession, I sowed these, which are starting to come through now. And my main leek supply over there in the corner is doing okay. Top of the bench, we've got some cosmos which I've sown, it's not coming through just yet, and 2 dahlias, seed that I sowed last week, challenged by Monty Don to sow dahlias on Gardener's World. I thought we'd have a go at running alongside him, so hopefully they'll come through okay. This is lobelia, a different variety. Trying the Charles Dowding seed tray. It does dry out quickly, even on a capillary mat. It's still drying out in places. So these need real attention to get a successful sowing, but doing fairly well. More onions. This is Bedfordshire Champion. They're looking well. And over here, a mixed tray of deep-rooted seedlings. I'm pleased to see that the celeriac has come through and is doing well. Here we've got rocket and some more sweet peas. And over on this side, we've got lots and lots of onions because I panicked and sowed lots of onions because I lost some. And now I've got a huge amount of onions, and I don't think I'm going to be needing anything like that many, so there's going to be a fair amount of onions being given away, I think. More ranunculus sprouting in here, and they're doing well. Just sprouting on the edge there, which is nice. Beetroot doing really nicely. This is a mixed tray of various things. We've got some onions, we've got some brassicas, and we've got some herbs. And if you want an update on my soil blocks, well, I think all but 2 have germinated perfectly, and they're holding together really well. So at the moment, I've got to say, it's worked out well, and time will tell. The art is in actually getting the watering right, and they're feeling a bit dry, so I think I'm going to be watering those today. And this is the strawberries waiting to be hung up and release the space for setting up the tomato growing for this year. But it's just too cold, and I'm going to keep all of those down at this level until it warms up a bit. But hey, they're trying to flower for me, and it looks like we're going to have a really good season of strawberries. They're all very healthy plants. And the ones with soil in are my Sherlock potatoes, and this is just getting some going early so that we get a feast of new potatoes early in the season. The apple mint's doing well there as well. Oh gosh, I wish we had smell-o-vision, because that smells delightful. So overall, the Polytunnel's doing okay. It's a real challenge with the extremes of temperature. -4 is about as much as these seedlings can take, in my view, and I'm having to do quite a lot of covering up every single night just to make sure everything is kept without being harmed, and I think that's working out. It's part of the growing process in these temperatures. Quite a lot of pruning earlier on. Pruned this apple tree, which is starting to show some buds, and I pruned the holly tree in the interest of getting some access to this area down here. And this is probably my next job on the plot, which is just to cover up this bit of ground that I've dug out and make this my whole potato pot location. And as I empty these tubs of last year's and previous year's compost, I will move them over to the side to give me space. But I was looking in these this morning just to see how everything is ticking along, and I was delighted to see worm casts up at this level. How fantastic that the worms get right to the tops of all of those bins. And whilst I fed those, I will give them a little bit of bloodfish and bone as I pot them up and put the potatoes in. And the chickens are loving this area and keeping it down from weeds mainly. The one weed that I'm obviously going to have to work at is nettles, which they don't really seem interested in even pecking. Can you not have a go at the nettles for me? You've just saved me a job. No? No, not keen. What I did find interesting is, having taken this, I don't know, about 8 to 10 inches out just to get it all flat, the soil's pretty dry apart from this area in the middle, and there seems to be 3 patches of water, and it's the same every day. I don't know where that's coming from. I guess it must be the natural point where the water from this part of the land just drains down to. But it's so interesting that it's just 3 blobs of water. Interesting to see how that goes during the course of the season. Although I will be covering it up, I suspect it'll remain quite soggy here. Well, the garlic is coming along nicely. Got a little bit of weeding to do in there because the sycamore tree tends to drop these seedlings a lot, but keep pulling them out, they're very easy. Everything's coming on well there. This little batch here were the bulbs that I took off the top of a garlic about 2 years ago, and every year they've got a little bit bigger, and this year, I don't know, might even get some garlic from them, or it might be another year where we split them up and replant them the following year. But there's plenty of garlic in there. I'm looking forward to getting my pots into use. I get this little area a bit tidy and then bring the main compost bins over to the side, and that should open this whole area up. And it's been a long old job getting the dip and filling it, so we're getting there. Certainly making a big difference to the space. And my compost area is tidy, or relatively tidy. We've got some compost in that one, some compost in this one. I would think my next delivery of compost will be going into these bins, but we're getting late in the season now, so I don't anticipate filling these. This is all my spare raspberries, spare rhubarb. These are the gooseberries that I took out of that area that we've just looked at, and they seem to be doing really well in pots. And that one particularly is doing well. So I'm looking forward to planting those up somewhere on the plot, but I'm going to give them a year just to rest and develop. This is more strawberries that took a hit, and as you can see, they're fighting back. Some of them won't survive, but they'll be great. They'll be ready for next year, and we'll have plenty of extra strawberries for taking runners from and doing the same next year. The thing that I've got to fix is, in creating this area for all the hens, I've actually left myself no access to the jostaberries. I have to go around the back, but the jostaberries are doing nicely. lots and lots of flowers. It's one of those berry bushes that flowers really early, and these look really healthy. I've given them a bit of a prune just to keep control, but they're certainly coming on nicely, and I would anticipate another really good crop from them this year. Well, nothing's happened with my hugelkultur bed so far, and it's just sitting dormant, waiting for me to get the herbs together and choose the right time to come out. But if I tuck underneath there, it's nice and damp and looking ready for rocking and rolling. Well, it's been a tough old winter. Lots of days of continual rain, and now we've got lots of very cold snow, frost, everything's been thrown at us. But I do feel like the allotment's ready for things to happen, so I'm looking forward to those warmer days when we can get everything growing and enjoy a summer. You've enjoyed my walk around the allotment in early April, and there's plenty of work to do on the allotment, so keep watching, follow my journey, and I'll share with you all my experiences, failures and successes. Hopefully more of the latter. I do hope you enjoyed the video today. If you did, click the subscribe button, click the like button, and if you want updates from me each time I upload a video, click the bell and select all. I do hope you have a great day. Diolch yn fawr.